music, audio gear, and anything else that crosses our minds. I'm Mark.
And I'm Peter.
And welcome to the Hurton Audio Podcast.
So this week, PYLOT has dropped a collaboration with singer from the Midnight, Tyler Lyle, and it is very, very good. And it's good for all the reasons you'd expect. It's a nice synthwave combination. It's fresh because, you get very used to hearing Tyler with the Midnight. But it doesn't sound like the Midnight, and it doesn't not sound like the Midnight because obviously Tyler brings so much to the table with it being his sort of songwriting and vocal delivery. But PYLOT takes a completely different approach with Time Bomb, especially in the choruses and the outro section, and it's just a really, really good sort of synthwave dance track.
And the way they do like this, they sort of break it down into just an instrumental like beat, just a pulsating dance floor beat, about 2/3 of the way through. And I don't know why, it's just that it's got that funky element that just makes you want to listen to it over and over again. And it's really, really cool the way the track builds, and then it just breaks it right back down to just like bass and drums, and then you just grooving on that.
It sort of starts out really, really dreamy with like halftime, like loads of really nice keyboards, very soft sounding keys and arpeggios. And then it sort of builds with this big sort of guitar swell into just a power chord heavy drop. And Tyler's going for it as well. And it's just really nice. It's really cool.
Yeah, and PYLOT's been using that type of sort of like guitar sounding drop, like that. Like all the drops seem to sound like something you could play on guitar, like in like a riff format. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he's used like the classic sort of guitar synth sound as well.
Yeah.
Very occasionally. But PYLOT's quite an interesting artist because he started out on Monster Cat, which is traditionally a lot more of a dance heavy label.
Associated with a lot of gaming like Rocket League as well, Monster Cat. If you don't know, they're everywhere. Like you hear Monster Cat's music from Beat Saber, Rocket League. There's just almost every game soundtrack seems to, particularly rhythm games, like a lot of like underground rhythm games that aren't as popular tend to have a lot of Monster Cat songs on because clearly they're very good at getting those sync deals with games companies.
They know as well that if you play a game, and like a game like Beat Saber, you've only got like 20 songs to play sometimes. If one of them is a Monster Cat song, chances are you might, if that's one that you gravitate towards, you're going to listen to that song. But he has made a very, very steady pivot into sort of doing more synthwavey cyberpunk sounds, which is very fascinating because you're sort of looking at somebody a bit like the Midnight themselves who start, and Gunship, who start outside of the genre and are sort of like going into synthwave with experiences that aren't necessarily, synthwave is the first thing they start making. They're coming from like different backgrounds, be it rock or folk or, dance. They're coming at it with a different angle. So I find that very fascinating how synthwave is a sort of genre that people sort of from other fields are like, I want to do that.
I think it's more of a melting pot genre though, because synthwave is one of very few genres I can think of where a rock guitarist can step into it as easily as like a house producer.
That's very true.
There's very few genres I can think of where you can have such a broad stroke because it's so versatile. Like we said on our Synthwave Only episode, that you can sort of do anything with it. And I think that's why you hear a lot of like pop artists utilising the synthwave sort of sound set, even if it's not directly derived from synthwave. Maybe it might be a producer or whatever that's like, let's do a little bit of this. And it just appears that way to the audience, or it appears that way to anybody who already is familiar with synthwave. If you're not familiar with synthwave as a term, you're just going to think it's 80s revival.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things, but if you listen to synthwave, you know what to listen for. But obviously synthwave is like always changing like any genre. So it gets harder to pick out, you have your staples of synthwave in a lot of these tracks, but a lot of them sort of pivot in different directions. So it can be harder to think of it as like traditionally like safe synthwave. Obviously, a lot of these artists that we're talking about are like on the fringes of the synthwave sound set.
They are, but they also, Gunship and the Midnight sort of encompass the more mainstream element of synthwave, which is really bizarre as well, because like you say, they're really, in reality, they are fringe artists in the genre.
But I suppose when you think about a lot of genres, a lot of the people who are doing something different tend to rise more popular because they've got a hook that other more generic artists don't sort of sell. If you know what I mean, that's why you tend to have, I'm trying to think of an example, but I mean, like, even with a lot of like the classic rock bands, you tend to have people who are going out on a limb, like say Eddie Van Halen with his tapping or whatever, that nobody else was doing, that they then popularise and then people copy that band. So then retroactively, it seems like they are the band. Like say, The Midnight, their debut EP and then album with Days of Thunder and Endless Summer, they sort of retroactively reinvented synthwave to a lot of people in what you listen to and what you associate with synthwave.
I would agree, yes.
Probably bringing the saxophone element into synthwave a lot more than it was there before. Because, I mean, somebody would have probably had a saxophone before The Midnight, but saxophone and synthwave The Midnight is the first artist I think of, the earliest artist I think of as well.
I think they definitely popularized it and made it like a thing where people are like, where's the saxophone solo? You know, like when they bring a new song out.
Yeah. You're waiting for it. You expect it almost.
Speaking of, you've got these exact same situations happening with Gunship, who's dropped their unbelievably good album, Unicorn, which is actually, as we speak, 8 on the UK official album chart, which is...
It's pretty good.
Crazy for I don't, when I say it's crazy for an artist like Gunship, it's not that I'm trying to say that they shouldn't or can't be there, but it's just unexpected to see that album could be, like, it's one below Kylie Minogue.
Yeah, and you would say that Gunship are, well, they're an independent, pretty much, band.
They're counterculture, though, I would have said, like, I mean, Gunship more so than bands like The Midnight, because they have that very cyberpunk, very sci-fi aspect to them. They just come across as so niche that it's hard to imagine so many people having the same interest.
Particularly when Gunship get virtually no radio support in the UK.
Yeah.
And a lot of the artists they're going up against in the chart battle are just thrashed on commercial radio and like... Public radio? Radio One? It's public radio, isn't it?
I'd just say Radio One.
Yeah, well, Radio One.
I think I want to say it's public. I've never really thought of it like that. Public radio, to me, sounds like independent, like local radio. That to me is public radio.
Yeah. I would national say, radio, I suppose.
Do you know, I was just
even though
say,
it's the same type of word, national
radio sounds better.
But yeah, that's what's interesting. Obviously, they've got Lights and Tim Capello's back, and they've got so many featurings on Unicorn as an album. They've got Milky Way from Wargasm, which is really, it doesn't seem like a good fit until you listen to the song. I didn't know who Wargasm was until after I listened to Monster in Paradise, which we sort of discussed on the Synthwave episode 2.
And then, obviously, they've also got returning featurings like... Charlie Simpson from Busted, and or should I say, let's credit him, Charlie Simpson from Fight Star, no, from both, and then Stella LePage joins again. She's done one on every album. But what's really good about Empress of the Damned, which has Lights and Tim Capello on, is Lights sort of is we was quite familiar with Pep from Lights, and that was really, really good. Like, I won't say it's an EP, isn't it?
It's an album.
Is it a full album?
It's an album, yeah.
It's really good anyway. Oh yeah, I don't know why I only remember it having 5 songs. I wonder if that's because I was listening to it pre-release. But that's really, really good. Like, it has some really good songs.
Yeah, In My Head and Okay, isn't it? If you scroll down for me. Oh, Money in the Bag's pretty good as well. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So, yeah, those songs they're like the singles.
Yeah,
obviously,
they're really good. And it was because when you're looking at like the announcement of Unicorn as an album. It's like, okay, so Lights is going to be on it. Well, what's she going to do? And she absolutely crushes it. It's amazing.
It's well worth checking out. You'll hear some very strange lines that you're not used to hearing in normal songs.
Yeah, it's the sort of album you want to have the lyric tab out for.
Yeah.
If it's even there yet. On some of the streaming services.
You'd say that Unicorn and Gunship as an artist are pretty concept driven, really. It's not about them in the band. It's all, like rooted in that cyberpunk sort of. Well, it's more cyberpunk than anything else, isn't it?
Definitely.
The general world that the 3 Gunship albums are sort of like set in.
It's a mixture of cyberpunk and sci-fi both being the same as each other, because tech noir, it's all a big Terminator reference. It's 100% sure it's Terminator.
It's really interesting with tech noir too, because you very rarely get a literal sequel. Like, you'll get spiritual sequels of songs, but to have a tech noir and a tech noir 2 is really satisfying.
They should like popularize this. Like, you have a big hit, like Bastille, Pompeii. Where's Pompeii 2, lads? That's what I think.
Well, they've sort of done Pompeii in a dozen different arrangements.
Yeah, but they haven't made a sequel. They've made a lot of remakes, but not a sequel. And I think that the idea, like, you're happy to see sequels in movies, in most media. It's a given in almost all television format.
And games, and well, pretty much anything. Really.
So why not have a sequel song for people's most popular songs? I think it's a bizarre, but also it's more bizarre that it's not a thing, because, like we say, it's. I mean, even like hardware and controllers and consoles, graphics cards, they all have sequels. They all have
phones, cameras, mice, sorry.
Guitar pedals, everything. So why would you not have a song have a sequel? There's so many songs come out a day. Like, what was it, like 100,000, something insane now?
100,000 songs hit Spotify, according to the CEO of CD Baby. That's like a relatively new stat.
What percentage of these songs are sequels to existing songs? That's what I want to know.
I suppose the argument comes in to... I mean, this argument's out the window anyway. If 100,000 songs hit a platform every day, but the argument is that we need as many original songs as we can get, because if we've got that many, why do we need sequels? But I agree, Peter, that I think the idea of taking like half of the composition that they've done, they've sort of like threaded the original tech noir's motifs and themes, and then danced around it, adding new sections and reinterpretations of it, which it's instantly familiar. And that's the thing that, a bit like the movie reboot culture, is that what you get with a song like Tech Noir 2, if you've heard the first one, and obviously it was a big track on the first album, so a lot of people are very familiar with it. There's something so nice about putting a brand new album on and hearing that familiarity and going... oh, I know how this one goes, but then you don't, because it all changes.
It lures you in like it's gonna be the same song with different words, sort of, and some different bits. But that's not how it goes. The chorus is very, very different, and all the trimmings are very different. But there's that initial verse motif that you was talking about. That's right at the start of the song, and in the second verse as well. That just it makes you think, oh my God, this is tech noir. And it's not. And that's what's genius about it.
Yeah, I mean, the full album's very catchy. And it's a little bit, like we was trying to say, like when we was thinking about the 3 Gunship albums, Dark All Day doesn't necessarily feel like the odd one out, but it definitely is, like the title suggests, a lot darker.
Yeah.
A lot more brooding, and a lot heavier in instrumental.
What I really connected with on Gunship's first album was that sort of arcade sort of feel. It had a very optimistic feel for the most of the album, even though Gunship do some quite dark sounding compositions, as you're saying. So Dark All Day, I really liked the album, but it got like with Thrasher and stuff, there's a heavier, slightly more atonal, slightly more sci-fi sound to it that I don't like connect with as much. I feel like Unicorn, it sort of straddles the line between them both, and I mean, like songs like Doom Dance as well. They've got like some sort of weird, bizarre party energy to them as well.
Yeah, Doom Dance is like, it's as upbeat as it is like broodingly heavy. And you know, across the full album, there's a lot of like TB03 acid sort of like bass lines sort of tucked away there that you wouldn't really think sit well in this sort of genre, but they are there when you listen to
I think because TB3 style stuff, acid stuff and techno stuff are all staples of cyberpunk as a genre. So because they're like cutting down the middle with the synthwave and cyberpunk thing in places, or they definitely take inspirations from both, don't limit themselves, they can just thread it all together and it somehow works. But they also use a lot of like quite heavy guitars as well, which is an interesting sort of combination too.
It's not so like different that it's shocking, but I think it's just that the way Gunship apply the sort of like your three pillars really. You've got your cyberpunk, your synthwave, and your rock. They sort of blend all three elements in like 33%. And then you end up with like almost a seamless transition through some of the genres because you know, it doesn't really go from a rock song to a synthwave song to a cyberpunk song. They're all sort of all three at the same time. And that's what's so sort of good but also strange about it. Particularly with songs like Taste Like Venom, you know, you could imagine the way it's paced, you could imagine Hall and Oates doing Taste Like Venom. It'd sound very different, but they could do it the way.
I feel like Hall and Oates is like what you want to say if you hear a song like above a certain tempo. You're like, oh, it could do that.
But it's got that rhythm to it, that what I associate with Hall and Oates, that type of rhythm. And, you know, like I say, that a lot of people seem to be doing that almost like the Man-Eater beat, basically.
Yes.
A lot of people
not like a soul.
It will be. It'll be derived.
Soul standard.
It'll be derived, and there'll be a name for the drum beat. But because I'm not listening and I'm not researching it right now, I can't think of what it is. It'll be something really, you know, simple at its core as well. Like it'll just be a beat with a shuffle on or whatever, like a little bit of swing.
Definitely feels Motowny. Does the like if we're going to Hall and Oates and like Footloose comes to mind. Don't know how similar that is off the top of my head, but that's the same tempo, the same.
What gives it the feel is the over-exaggerated 80s production. Like when Hall & Oates did it, the drum kit just sounded like a drum kit.
Yeah.
But retroactively, you listen to Hall & Oates and you think it's 80s, so we need a big gated snare, we need a boomy kick, and then it ends up like getting the modern 80s treatment where it's like even bigger, even subbier, and then it hits like a brick. And then you listen to Hall & Oates and go, oh, this doesn't sound like what everybody's saying, but really it's sort of derived from that.
Yeah.
To me, it is anyway. That's what I associate when I hear that type of rhythm.
So the question, the ever-present question is synthwave heading to be a mainstream genre? A bit like sort of where drum and bass has found itself, where it's been counterculture for so long. And then at a certain point, particularly in the UK, it's sort of become pop culture.
I feel like the way drum and bass is constantly played on Radio 1, and it's just it seems like one of the core pillar genres that they seem to always be peddling on Radio 1.
Yeah.
It definitely, if you're tuned into Radio 1 and you're tuned into the massive drum and bass scene, you're going to feel like it is a pretty big genre in the UK. But you know, I challenge anybody listening to put Radio 1 on and not hear a drum and bass song for like 3 hours.
Oh, yeah.
They're always playing drum and bass on Radio 1.
They do play it a lot.
And with that being the biggest station in the country, obviously, if they're playing a certain genre, people listen and go, I like that, and listen to it. And it sort of builds upon it as well.
Yeah.
And that's the more commercial side. And then obviously you have the full underground side that people are already doing. But it helps when you have that dual marketing for a genre to make it big. And that's really what synthwave needs, is it needs that radio support.
You see, there's a lot of different synthwave artists getting played on introducing stations, and I can never wrap my head around that because a lot of them are signed and a lot of them tour and a lot of them, you know, they've got audiences, and then they're like, well, we'll play you one Saturday on Introducing, and I'm like, what is that?
Also, they're playing the smaller synthwave acts, but they're not going
Playing the
near
bigger ones.
The big ones. And then it makes you question whether this is like, is it, do the bands have to like strike up a contract or a deal to get that airplay? You'd assume that with them being in the charts that they would get some radio play, but it doesn't seem to work like that in general with radio. Like you can have a top 10 album, or like what was the band called who got a number one album? The
Hurtons?
The Hurtons. I didn't hear.
Right?
They got played. They got brought in and got played once on Radio 1, but they never got put on the C list, B list, or A list rotation. So
yeah, not that I'm
aware of anyway. But so it is an interesting thing. Radio and the charts, or radio and what people listen to, don't seem to really add up in the manner you'd expect. But
was it this year? God, that's smart.
What are you looking at, Pierre?
Would you say, was it this year they got the number one, earlier this year?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah. So there've been this album, weren't it? What's the song?
Oh, I don't know what the song was.
I'm just trying to think.
I mean, looking at the track listing, I can understand why Radio 1's not trying to play it.
It does come across as
explicit.
Its own thing. The visual style is very different to what we've been talking about this week.
I think it's catering, though, to a different audience to me and you, though, Peter, isn't
it's also trying to be relatable. I suppose there's two aspects. There's being relatable through escapism, which is what synthwave does. What the Hurtons sort of do, visually at least, is they are almost too relatable. They're going for a very British thing. Like,
we're on the bus.
If you're not British, this ain't going to make any sense.
Yeah. You're not going to understand the references, are you? That's the thing.
Yeah, that's what... But again, I suppose then if you're not British, you might look at these and there might be a bit like the way a lot of British people see America. There's that law of, well, that's not what I experienced.
It's different, and therefore you want to check it out.
You want to check it out. You want to see what's going on.
I do think that with music in particular, a lot of people tend to think a lot higher of artists that they're listening to that aren't in their nationality, because there's like you say, part of that escapism, but also part of that just feeling like it's something different to listen to, a different culture. Like it's funny to say, but even if you're English listening to American bands, it is like a different culture entirely. And that's the same thing. Like that's why a lot of American bands listen to English music and English like indie scene and stuff, because they can get a different take on a genre that they won't hear by other American bands, because the culture's so different.
It's sort of shocking how certain things don't translate either way, or how certain things sort of sound so glamorous, even though on the other side of the pond they're so mundane. It's like the country music thing. It's just not really a thing in England. It's crazy.
There's a very small UK country scene with the shires and stuff, but it is very small.
But would you not akin it slightly more to folk music?
Yeah, well, they're saying it's UK country just to market it interestingly.
Yeah, it's sort of. I mean, it can exist. You can also have people who are sort of like actively influenced. I mean, Dire Straits come to mind. They do some songs that have very, very country sounding sort of parts to them.
Yeah, like the Bug and stuff. It's very much rooted in country music. Yeah, but the thing is this not the style where you're saying that country music by proxy has to be made by an American?
It's sort of an authenticity argument, isn't it? It's that classic authenticity argument. You know, you can't have country that's authentic if it's, not from a certain place, I suppose. I mean, you can, but maybe even if you are from New York or LA, if you become a country artist, you're going to be like, well, I'm based in Nashville.
Could you be a country music from New York? Could you be an artist who's based and does all the videos and everything in New York and still be classed as country?
I don't know. I can't think of any examples of that.
No, because they're always in like the central area almost all the time.
at some point, if you are from New York, you will be based in Nashville, and then if you leave Nashville, you would always have on your bio formerly Nashville based.
Well, this is what I'm saying.
The law.
It's sort of it's hand in hand, isn't it? That's what I'm sort of getting at, and that's your dilemma. It's like with a lot of these genres, they're more visual as well as music. Like I feel like a lot of the synthwave artists who break out the visual style, they sort of lose that element of marketability in that scene.
I think synthwave has more of a visual identity than it does a sonic identity, to be honest.
Because the visual identity is so specific, but yet the sonic identity can be so many different things.
Yeah.
As with Cyberpunk, you expect the city. It's like on Doom Dance's single cover, you have the city in the background, you have the colours, you just have, even like down to Gunship's font and everything, it all is screaming a certain thing at you.
And the characters on there are sort of screaming like 90s anime, aren't they? Or 80s anime.
Yeah.
Like a real nostalgia trip.
Because it's based off a box art cover, I believe they said, but I can't remember. I think they didn't allude to which one it was. I think you have to know.
Yeah, that's
you have to know.
Authenticity scanner is, if you don't know, then sucks to be you sort of situation. Well, I don't know what it is, not by looking at it.
But it's been a pretty good week for new releases so far as well.
Yeah,
it's nice to get a full album from a band like Gunship. I know we've been waiting for this for a long while.
I feel like they sort of announced it like almost immediately after Dark All Day, just saying Gunship 3. A bit like Bastille always does, where they show you like a hard drive and like Bastille 60. Bastille 4.
It's almost like at the end of like the Disney shows where it says this character will return.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but when? And then it's like 4 years later, and they're like, this is the series. And you're like, I've forgot now. That's the only problem when the wait's so long. But obviously, this is a long, like, lengthwise, this album is twice as long as some of the other albums by, say, like The Main or whatever.
Pound for pound, it is an album worth listening to.
It's twice as long. Like, typically, albums have gone back to, like, that vinyl format in the 70s and 80s of being half an hour. And you've seen that because, obviously, you've got 10 2-minute 50 songs now instead of 10 4-minute songs. But, obviously, Gunship's got 14 songs, and then some of them are 5 minutes and stuff. So, it's just a nice album length. And an hour, I think about 10 years ago, you would expect an hour for every album. Like, it was getting to that sort of point where a lot of albums lasted an hour. And now it's sort of because of streaming culture and radio culture, but also this comes back to the attention span of people. Can you sit through a 5-minute song when you've got all your friends waiting to put another 2-minute song on? 5 minutes feels like a long time in a playlist.
Yeah, it can do, yeah. In like a DJ set or something.
Yeah, or even on radio. It makes a big difference, and that's the type of thing that you're seeing. So you're seeing songs getting shorter, albums getting shorter. It's funny to me that even when all the songs are 2.5 minutes, a lot of people go 11 songs.
Yeah, well, you'd think like
you get 20.
Proxy, it would be easier to make them, and it would be more beneficial, like you said, to fill the space on the album. They'd get more stream revenue because there'd be like 20 or 2-minute songs,
yeah,
which would all count for streaming. Instead of having like 14 5-minute 30 songs or whatever. Yeah, I don't understand why there ain't more when they do that. But I suppose there's that full argument of trim it down so every like millisecond is a banger. But I feel like that is not quite possible with music.
I think as well, people think of an album as 9 to 17 songs, roughly, somewhere in that catchment radius. A lot of people would say 10 to 13 songs is ideal.
But there are albums that are getting up there with like 30 and 40 tracks.
Oh, yeah, like Migos had an album that had 30, 40 tracks. So I know that a few... it seems to be more in the hip-hop field that they seem to go for like that massive track list.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like we say, Richie Kotzen had 50 songs for 50. That was one continuous 50 songs. It wasn't split into discs or anything on Spotify. So, they are there, but I'm just saying, like, typically your average album that you would pick up in a shop would have 10 to 15 songs on.
Yeah. maybe 15 plus for a deluxe edition, but you would expect under 15 on most albums.
And anything under 8 songs is an EP, as far as people are concerned. Whether the songs last 20 minutes or not, it doesn't seem to matter. Like, if you have Thick as a Brick by Jethro Tull, which has, like, what, 144-minute song on, is that an album or an EP?
Well,
or is it a single?
It's technically a single. Technically, it's a single, unless you can break it into parts. And then this is the 2112 argument from Rush.
Because people say that's like an album, or is it an EP? You know, because it's got, like, if you split 2112 into one song, it's got like 5 songs on.
Yeah, but I would still call it, I mean, I suppose here's the thing that cuts this argument down nice and concisely. What does it stand for? Extended play, long play. The length defines if it's long play. If the song's 40 minutes, it has to be an LP. There you go.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now, obviously, albums used to be a lot more free-flowing, but because of streaming culture, I think everybody's getting sort of beaten into the same type of release. You'd think that you could do a lot more with streaming culture, but I think it's just like tradition, isn't it? Tradition dictates that people do traditional albums. I mean, people said the album was going to be dead, but I feel like the album's more popular than ever.
Bigger than ever, 100%. But I also think, though, that there's like a release strategy. Like, at the moment, it seems to be about 5 singles before the album comes out. So when your album comes out, it's already like semi-platinum. That's the strat. It's about such a weird
inflating Spotify statistics and any streaming statistics, but it's about going, yeah, well, this album already has 19 million streams, and you go, well, it hasn't come out yet.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but the 5 songs that we've released off it have 19 million streams or more.
That's the power of bending the medium. So by being able to collect the data and then store the data of the album in singles, the way that they do it, with it's a UPSC code, is it?
Something along
something
those
like that.
USC.
For those who don't know, there's a code basically that straps the songs together. So if you're listening to a single, let's take Gunship for example. If you're listening to Taste Like Venom, and then you listen to Taste Like Venom on Unicorn, you'll notice that it has the same amount of streams as the single because they are tied together with a code. And that code means they are basically the exact same song in that sense.
Which also is so baffling that a lot of people pull the singles off Spotify when it doesn't really do them any harm to have them there.
That's true as well. Well, I think we've really got into the, particularly into Gunship's album, but it is a good album. And if you're into synthwave and cyberpunk, I would really recommend listening to it. It is fantastic. And I've been Peter.
I've been Mark. Thanks for listening.